Here at the UN, they had a peace plan for Libya. It was, though, disrupted by one man, General Khalifa Haftar. He is not our guest on Talk to Jazeera. Instead, this week, we speak to someone who knows him well, the former Foreign Minister and Libyan MP, Aly Abuzaakouk. They were in exile together in the US, and he also knew Gaddafi during his school days. He says that Haftar is now resembling the former dictator. Aly Abuzaakouk, former Foreign Minister of Libya, Libyan MP, thank you for joining us here on Talk to Jazeera. Your country is, in population terms, a relatively small one, 6 or 7 million people living on the side of the Mediterranean, most of them living in one part of the country with huge oil wealth. And yet we've seen only since the revolution in Libya conflict and chaos. Do you think there will be a prosperous Libya coming forward?
For sure. Libya lived for 42 years under a totalitarian Gaddafi regime. After 42 years of dictatorship, I think the country needs some time to regain its health. Unfortunately, many of the warlords and people who are, trained under the Gaddafi regime thought that this is an opportunity for them to amass wealth. And that created a vacuum in the country because the revolution in 2011 had no leadership. It was a popular revolution. So many of the people, even who ran it, were Gaddafi people.
I suspect some of the problems in the revolution go back to the time of Gaddafi, and for most of your life he was in control of Libya. He came to power in 1969. What was life like under Gaddafi?
Well, what is life under any dictatorial regime? Lack of freedom, lack of rule of law, lack of decency, lack of development, human development and country development. Libya in 42 years after the end of the Gaddafi, the country was worse than when it was in 69. By the way, he is my generation. We were the same age, 42, both of us were born in 42. And I knew him in grade school, and I knew him after that. Even he tried to entice me to be with him in 72, to be one of his ministers. I said I'd rather be teaching at the university.
And he then imprisoned you and tortured you.
Because
How bad was that?
Because I was an open critic. He didn't like open critic or people who will criticize him openly. I was one of them.
How did you get out of Libya, and what was life in exile like?
In 76, when I was ousted of the universities, most of the people who ruled Libya at that time were my generation. So I was able to get out of Libya and came to the States because I knew the States very well. I studied my master's and my PhD, and I said, this is a place I would like to stay. I raised my family here and continue to study also Islamic studies in Michigan for a master and PhD. And I started in 1980 when he started his campaign to kill the opposition leaders outside, including me. I sent some people to assassinate me. We started the National Front for the Salvation of Libya against him, and since then I worked it out against him in all aspects of whatever availability opportunities arise.
It was, though, a long struggle. What were your thoughts finally in the beginning of 2011 when the revolution started?
Well, it was a dream coming true. I mean, we were not dreaming that the Libyan people will really revolt, but the Arab Spring in Tunisia and in Egypt gave a new life.
What went wrong? Because everyone fought Gaddafi and Gaddafi fell, but then it seems everyone fought each other.
I think when you analyze the situation in Libya, the uprising has no leadership. So most of the leadership that came and run the country were mostly people from the old regime or some expatriates who came and joined them.
Like yourself?
I didn't run there. I was doing the work of training people to be citizens. So I did establish the citizenship forum, and for 2 years I have, trained Libyans from Tobruk to Ras Jdeir to Gat. Thousands of people I trained. But the question is that because the cohesiveness of the society was broken, because of the rule. Dictatorial rules don't give you an opportunity to build relationship, to build, solidarities, to build civil societies. Student unions were banned or were controlled. Trade unions were banned or controlled. All of the, what you can call, if you look at Tunisia, which has a very vibrant civil society, in Libya there is none.
You've mentioned the role in 2011 of the international community. In particular, NATO, with its bombing, was key in the military overthrow of Gaddafi. But did the international community do enough, particularly in the key period after Gaddafi was toppled?
I think there is an opportunity missed by the international community, because getting rid of Gaddafi was step number one. Building Libya to really restructure itself was step number two, and the community, or the world community at large, left Libya alone. And that, I think, was a great mistake.
I was in Libya in August 2011 when Gaddafi fled from Tripoli and his government basically fell. I was back just a few months later in October when Gaddafi was killed. And it was interesting in that short space of time, although on each occasion there was a great deal of euphoria, it was clear things had gone bad in the first few months. Militia were already in control in Tripoli.
Oh yes, I think there were. Among them was really the decision to give people who are fighting or who claim to be fighting the Gaddafi forces monthly stipendiums. So instead of 30,000 revolutionary forces, the number sprang to 300,000 revolutionary forces. Most of them were not the fighters. And people have discovered that this is a very good opportunity to amass money. So people have started to create their own militias, and in every city almost, people have established new militias.
It is now such a complicated situation. You have various different militias in different parts of the country. You have rival governments, rival parliaments.
Well, on the surface, yes. In reality, there is only one recognized government, which has been the byproducts of a Khairat political agreement. It's called the Government of National Accord, NGA. And with it, there should be two more major political organizations, the State Council and the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives was hijacked in Tobruk with, under the control of the Libyan National Army, the militia of Colonel Haftar. And until Haftar attacked Tripoli, the House of Representatives did not come to Tripoli. But after they attacked Tripoli, members of the House of Representatives from the western areas realized that this is the time to break away from Tobruk. The political agreement called for a creation of a new parliament from people who were elected in 2014 and from the boycotters like me. And we did it on first week of April, after he attacked Tripoli. We really gathered in Tripoli, and more than 50 members of the House of Representatives started a new parliament and said this is the parliament according to the political agreement. The parliament in Tobruk is completely out, and because they made a statement supporting the attack of Haftar on Tripoli.
You bring up the subject of General Khalifa Haftar. Not many people have known him as long or as well as you have. So let's just examine who this man is. He was there at the time of the coup in 1969 with Gaddafi. he was a close associate of Gaddafi, yes?
Yes. He was one of the people who did the coup against the king. And that's where the agony of Libya started in September 1969. Again, he was the commander of the Libyan army who attacked Chad and did havoc in Chad. And he was defeated in Chad and was imprisoned in Chad. Gaddafi even doesn't recognize that he had an army in Chad, or he has Khalifa Haftar in Chad.
So he disowned General Haftar.
He sold them.
Do you think, looking back now, that episode might have been quite important in the psychology of General Haftar and how he's acting now?
I think so, because in some of the conversations I had with Haftar, he said he was so mad about Gaddafi's denial of them being imprisoned in Chad, because in those days, if the Chadians have killed all of them, nobody would say any word. He made the reconciliation with Gaddafi in the last 7 years of Gaddafi's life. Gaddafi made approaches with many people, according to him. He gave him money, he gave him a palace for his children in Cairo. He even paid tuition for his children to study in Cairo. So there was a good relationship between him and Gaddafi in the final years of Gaddafi's rule.
Let me just go back to Chad. He and his troops were imprisoned in Chad. Eventually it was the US that brokered his freedom, I believe, to what was then known as Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, then on to Kenya, and then to the US, to live in Virginia, the same place the CIA are based. Begs me to ask the question, do you believe General Haftar was working for the CIA?
I think the narration of the situation goes back to where the National Front for the Salvation of Libya has a program to attack Libya and to liberate Libya from Gaddafi from Chad. And they did the deal with the Americans and with the Chadians that if they let the Libyan prisoners of war in Chad released, they can be starting the Libyan National Army as part of the NFSL, the National Front for the Salvation of Libya. When Idriss Déby was successful in his coup against Hussein Hebri,
these are the Chadian leaders,
the
one
Chadian
who toppled
leader,
the other.
Yeah. He toppled him down with the help of the French. The whole project failed, and the Americans helped the prisoners of war who were in Chad and transported them to the United States.
So General Haftar is living in the US as an exile from Libya. You are living there too. Did you know each other?
Before we did not, but we knew each other when he came to Virginia. And we lived for many years together as acquaintances, as friends in the northern Virginia city of Fairfax. And as far as I know, he was with all the Libyans who came from Chad, refugees who want help and who want to rebuild their lives there. After many years with the National Front of Salvation of Libya, he decided to break away from it, and he established with some other people another movement, another opposition movement away from the National Front. And since then he became by himself working on his own projects. From the conversations we had together, he is a man who believes that he is worthy of controlling Libya, and he always speaks about Libya needs a strong force to control it.
You said you were a friend at the time. Did you consider that he could be a ruthless military leader then?
I never had that idea in my mind. I thought that since he was, suffered from the ruthless regime of Gaddafi, that he should not repeat the same ruthless mentality or attitude.
And when he decided after the revolution started in 2011 to go to Libya, you were there at his side, taking him to the airport, I believe.
Yes, and it was, really, an effort to help the revolution. And when he went back to Libya, He started to build his own, entourage, his own special forces, his own ego status. I realized that this is not a person that I will continue to have a relationship with.
Because he went to Benghazi, besieged part of Benghazi, went to another city in the east, Derna, besieged Derna. He's been accused, and some of his those working within his forces, of war crimes. Could you have foreseen any of these things?
Never, never. And by the way, these are the results of later on. At the beginning, he was supposedly working with the revolutionary forces until Gaddafi was toppled. But then he started working on his own. And in 2014, he made, a coup d'etat on the TV. But still, I think he was able to amass some support for himself in the eastern part of Libya, and started in the pretext of fighting terrorism in Benghazi, fighting against the revolutionary forces there. He said it will take 2 weeks. It took 4 years to fight against 400, 500 revolutionary forces there. After he decimated Benghazi, he did the same thing to Derna, the two centers of civilization in the eastern part of Libya.
And then he went on through the south of Libya. He had quite a bit of international support, we think. We'll come to that in a moment. But I just want to complete the story, which is in April, when he launched online an announcement: the time has come, on April the 4th, an assault on the capital, Tripoli. And he did it remarkably at the time when the UN Secretary General was in Tripoli. The UN had a plan for a national conference in Gaddafis and then eventually elections. To make that announcement at that time with the top World Organization leader in the capital, very audacious.
Just not very audacious. It's shocking, because he showed complete disregard to the United Nations, to the Secretary General, and to the representative Hassan Salama, whom he was with a week or two before in Abu Dhabi, making a rapprochement between him and Sarraj.
He basically had said he would sign up to the UN plan, but he was kidding everyone.
He did, but because the man doesn't want to share power with anybody, he realized that if he went to the Gaddafis conference, he will only have part of the power. And he decided to abruptly blitzkrieg the conference and attack Tripoli and control the power himself.
Has it worked? You now have his forces surrounding Tripoli like two pincers. Do you think he can move further and take the capital?
I don't think so, because his attack on Tripoli was the rallying point of the February revolutionary forces that came from Misrata, from the mountains, from the Zintan, from Zawiya, from Zlitan, Homs. Many forces have come together to really rallying to support Tripoli, and the militia in Tripoli also defended their city. And now most of these forces, which are supported by the or supporting the government of Sarraj, is really they stopped the forces of Haftar, and now they are hitting them back.
So you've given us the situation as you see it, the military situation inside Libya. But the one thing we haven't looked at is the support that General Haftar has outside Libya. And that may be his secret card: the support of Egypt, the support of Saudi Arabia, the support of the United Arab Emirates. We know when he was operating in Benghazi, there were French special forces there that seemed to be on his side. He's got very strong backers, hasn't he?
Well, the former president of Tunisia spoke about the axis of evil. The Abu Dhabi, the Saudis, and the Egyptians. Add to them the French. This axis of evil have a mandate to work against the success of the Arab Spring. They were able to do it in Egypt, and Sisi now is governing Egypt with his full authority. as if a new dictator there. They tried in Tunisia, they were not able. So they found Haftar as somebody who can work with them. It's amazing that somebody like Haftar, when he said that if the Egyptians make a decision which is against my interest in Libya, I will take it, which means against even national aspirations. Not only this, lately he said, even the Egyptians send me 10 million people to live in Libya, I will accept it. Something that made all the Libyans so angry. I mean, who are you to give the Egyptians this card that they can invade the country? This situation, I think the international community have to realize they have supported Haftar with weapons against the United Nations Security Council resolutions. And nobody spoke about it.
There's an arms embargo. No one's
There is
supposed
an
to
arms
send
embargo,
any weapons in.
and everybody knows, even in the briefings of the United Nations envoy, that there are arms coming from those three countries, or at least Abu Dhabi and Egypt, to Mr. Haftar.
He may well, though, have another even more important supporter. General Haftar had a phone call with President Trump. We know there are some around President Trump who may be persuading President Trump that what Libya needs is another strong man, and that is General Haftar.
I think it was against the policy of the American administration. And, those who know Washington very well, they know that the lobbying groups could make such moves. And I think the lobbying groups which are paid by the Abu Dhabi government, and by the way, I always speak about Abu Dhabi government, not the Emirates, because they are the spearheading of all of these efforts. The rest of the Emirates are not part of it. They are also supported by the Egyptians and the Saudis.
How do you see this particular moment where we are in Libya? Is this a moment that is dire, that is dangerous, or is this a moment of opportunity and hope potentially?
There is an old saying that in every crisis there is an opportunity. This crisis has created an opportunity for all the forces of February 17 to rally together. And even in the East, there are tribes now who have come openly against Haftar and spoke that what he did on Tripoli is not acceptable. And they are calling for reconciliation with the rest of the country. So we are coming now to realization that Haftar base of support in the East is not as it used to be. There are a lot of complaints. Life in Benghazi and in Derna is unbearable. It's worse than the days of Gaddafi. There's no freedom of speech. There is no freedom of law. There are a lot of killings, extrajudicial killings. And the ICC, the International Community Court, has already indicted some of the assistants of Haftar himself. He himself should be under investigation. And thanks to the Foreign Relations Committee of the House of Representatives in the Congress, which sent a letter to the Attorney General to start investigating the crimes of Haftar, because he is also an American citizen. They also asked the FBI director to open the files for Haftar. So there are now forces in Washington and in The Hague, to really follow up the war crimes which have been committed in Libya. And I'm very clear that the war crimes committed by Haftar or others should be investigated. The Libyans deserve to have some of those criminals be brought to justice.
Aly Abuzaakouk, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much for having me.